The instincts are probably the least understood aspect of the Enneagram by casual Enneagrammers, and yet they have a profound influence on the expression of our Enneagram type. The three instincts are the social instinct, the self-preservation instinct, and the sexual instinct. These instincts are the topmost layer of our psyche. So it doesn't go personality type, instincts, it goes instincts, personality type. This is why I always point to the instincts as the main reason why people are mistyping themselves or get mistyped by others. Your instinct can operate so intensely that it's almost all people experience when they're around you. So we all have a primary instinct, and then a secondary instinct, which we pretty much just use to support the primary instinct. And then finally, our third instinct is typically something that we suppress due to some trauma we experienced growing up. Okay, now that you have a general context on the Enneagram instinct, let's talk about how sixes look when they have a primarily social instinct. When sixes operate primarily out of the social instinct, they become like relational superglue. They're not going anywhere, and they tend to fit in with just about everybody, especially if they're a six-wing seven. They believe in showing up for others because it's what they most hope you'll do for them when they're in need. Because social sixes are so image conscious, they can often be a little goody two-shoes about always following the rules and end up looking a lot like a rigid type 1 reformer. The big difference between social sixes and ones, though, comes down to the one's willingness to create conflict if they feel like the rules are unjust or if people aren't being fair. Social sixes are far more likely to let things slide so long as it keeps them in the good graces of whoever's in charge. Social sixes are all about going with the flow, which makes it hard for them to advocate for themselves and makes them really uncomfortable with any success that makes them stand apart from the group. They've got some major tall poppy syndrome, and they're afraid that success outside the group means sacrificing the support and camaraderie of the group. When social sixes aren't healthy, they'll actually choose to suffer within their social network or family system rather than leaving it to find true healing and growth. It's kind of like the better the devil you know than the angel you don't. Some social sixes are so afraid of being alone and unsupportive that they fall into some toxic groups like gangs or radical groups on the fringes of society. But when they are healthy, social sixes use their strength of leadership to create structure and community where there would likely otherwise just be chaos and disconnection. All right, that's the social instinct. Now let's move on to the self-preservation instinct. When type sixes are primarily driven by the self-preservation instinct, they become the ultimate homemaker. They like nothing more than creating a safe, comfortable little love nest to enjoy all that life has to offer. Self-preservation sixes are very concerned with protecting the home, which makes them very strategic about how they spend their money, who they choose as friends or neighbors, and especially who they choose as romantic partners. Self-preservation sixes see all these relationships as allies in the struggle for survival in an unkind or cruel world that will constantly take your resources from you if you're not sharp. Oh, and if the six has a five wing, this desire to hoard resources is amplified even more. Self-preservation sixes are likely the one in the family responsible for managing the budget because they like to control every major aspect of the home life, and money is most definitely a major cause of their constant anxiety around survival. Also, self-preservation sixes tend to express their anxiety more readily to friends and family in the hope that it'll garner their support. When self-pres sixes become overly stressed, they react by clinging on to whatever's familiar. So even if they're in a bad job, a bad relationship, or both, they just hold on for dear life because they feel terrified of losing what feels like their last shred of stability. When loved ones start to pull away or put up boundaries with the self-preservation six, their anxiety turns into aggression, and they feel like they need to go on the attack against those former allies turned enemies. However, when self-preservation sixes are healthy, they overcome this tendency to have catastrophic thoughts about the future, and instead they transcend their personal anxiety so they can make bold choices that actually improve the quality of their life, friendships, and of course, their finances. Okay, that's the self-preservation instinct. Last up is the sexual instinct. When sixes operate primarily out of the sexual instinct, they look like little Instagram models because they value physical power and attractiveness above all else. I want to be careful not to go too deep into some unhelpful stereotypes here, but for men, it's a lot of the cultural ideas about strength and toughness, and for women, it's a lot about having the perfect body. Sexual sixes also want their partner to embody these traits, no pun intended. They need society to affirm they made a good choice. Again, sixes struggle to listen to their own inner guidance, so they look around at what culture admires and then they try to manifest it in their own physical traits. Sexual sixes also tend to be a lot more extroverted, direct, and intense. Sometimes they can even feel like eights, especially if they're counterphobic, because they seek out dramatic challenges to prove their strength and have a sort of like, don't F with me mentality. However, if they're a phobic 6 with a sexual instinct, they're far more subtle in their seduction and can even look like 4s because of their coy, mysterious way of flirting. Either way, both phobic and counterphobic sexual 6s have the hardest time with authority because while they want support, they resist feeling controlled more than anything else. When they get unhealthy, sexual 6s resort to spreading lies and gossip about the people they want to remove from power. They usually always have a specific person in mind when they go on the attack, rather than railing against organizations like other 6s might. At their best though, sexual 6s have a great eye for strength of character, and if they move beyond the superficial tendencies, they can really find and bring out the best in people that would probably go overlooked by mainstream society. Okay, those are the Enneagram instincts for the Type 6 loyalist. Time to get into the triads.